All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to Making the Argument. You know, it wasn't that long ago that what we commonly refer to as woke and the all of the nonsense associated with it seemed like it was on the ascendancy, as if there was nothing that could stop it. Like everything was just getting drowned in its wake, whether it was education, media, politics, even sports. Sports, ladies and gentlemen, the NFL, quite possibly one of the manliest and most masculine of sporting events. The whole idea of people putting on pads and destroying each other in order to score points. They were bowing to the woke mob. And then all of a sudden, one day I woke up and I watched as woke went too far. And amazingly enough, it wasn't the various institutions that I might have expected to push back against it and actually gain ground and actually cause it to stop in its tracks, right? It was comedy. It was comics. That's right. The very people that we consider to be part of the arts and entertainment industry, the very industry which was actually like full blown, like pushing a lot of this stuff. It was this aspect of that industry which stood up and said, "Yeah, no, we're not doing
Yeah,
this. We're not doing
yeah.
this. We're not being regulated." Well, today, ladies and gentlemen, I have with us a good friend, actor, comedian, all around good guy, machete expert, Bryan
Athlete,
Callen.
high school athlete, all around high school athlete, coordinated. Not
Yeah,
explosive, not fast, but coordinated,
yeah.
coordinated.
Oh
And with
yeah.
with he's got some hustle.
Oh yeah,
That's all.
absolutely, absolutely. We've talked about this. Well, I first met Brian. We actually met out in Los Angeles, out there in Manhattan Beach, and we were going to be on his podcast at the time in his studio, and his beautiful bride calls up as we're driving there and is like, "Yeah, I think I'm going into labor," and we're like, and we understandably postponed the podcast at this point. So
I tried to push through. I said, I mean, define labor, and you literally you turned to me and went, "Dude, hey, dude, I'm not gonna be the guy that,
oh,
that caused you to miss your child's birth." And I was like, "All right."
it's like I haven't even met your wife yet. I don't want to be the guy that was the reason you weren't there for it. And
Well,
now, lo and
yeah.
behold, he did hold off for several more weeks after that before.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's right. We put a cork in things. My ex-wife, I have to say, mentioned you. She said something to the effect of, "I love that guy Nick Freitas. I don't know if you know him." And I said, "He's my buddy, and I hung out with him recently." And I'm not kidding, Nick. She clutched her chest. She clutched her chest. I went, "Wow, this is okay. All right, he wins. He wins. It's all good." So I don't know how my current wife is going to react, but
Yeah.
listen,
Well, hey, so first off, like I mean, I've watched your specials and whatnot, and I've seen movies that you've been in, and I think you're hilarious. But tell everyone just a little bit about your background and like how does one get into comedy as an industry?
I think that in a lot of ways, the short answer is I wasn't good at anything else. And I remember trying to be. Of course, you go to theater school, and the idea that I wanted to be an actor. Yeah, I just remember. I really mean this, and I don't know if I've said this in this way, but I remember being probably 10 or 11 and seeing a tennis pro. I think his name was Vince Van Patten. He was a good looking dude. And he came out of the bathroom and girls were screaming. They wanted to take a picture. And I remember I was like this sort of gangly little, you know, bundle of points. And I kind of looked and I went, I want that. That looks like success. Like that kind of attention. They love him and it means he's good at something. And I said, well, how do I get good at something? And you learn that you're not going to be running punts back in the NFL. And school made no sense. I just could never. I had the worst ADHD, in the world. And so you always feel a little bit too. The expression a pair of brown shoes in a black tuxedo world.
Mhm.
I think to be a comic you have to feel rather out of sorts generally. I think you need a healthy dose of neurosis. You need some chaos in your childhood.
Mhm.
I was moved every 2 years, every year and a half to different countries until I was 14 years old.
Wow.
I mean, different. Literally, you're talking about born in the Philippines, lived in India, Calcutta, and Bombay. then moved to Lebanon, then Pakistan, then Lebanon again. The war breaks out. My dad can't get back into the country. We get evacuated to Greece, then Saudi Arabia, then boarding school because I couldn't go to high school in Saudi Arabia. My family was still in Saudi Arabia. So, there's chaos. You can never hold on
Yeah.
to a dog or friends. You're always being thrown into a whole new set of circumstances. And if you're a boy, I love people. You quickly figure out that the way to get your people to like you is to make them laugh. Don't be the last guy picked on the team. Be somewhat coordinated and get people, make people laugh. So I developed a high social IQ, and I realized that I was good at. I figured out a way to. I was good at kind of maybe it was inherent. I have no idea, but making people laugh was sort of forced on me by necessity.
Well,
Then I go to theater school.
let me ask
Yeah.
let me ask you something real quick, because when you hear making people laugh and the whole deal, I think a lot of people think, yeah, naturally some people can do it, other people can't, but everyone recognizes the value of it, except maybe your elementary school teachers when you're doing it in the middle of class. But people don't especially think of, gosh, where would I go? Where would I go to learn the sort of social cues to be funny? Saudi Arabia. That's where I would go. Like, so,
Yeah.
like, how are
Well,
you?
I think part of it is this. A lot of kids grow up and you have time to build something and you have things to rely on.
Yeah.
You just do, right? So if you want to make it on a D1 team, or your dream is to make it in the NFL, let's just say you're a football player. There's Pop Warner, there's Pee Wee, that you go through and there are things you can rely on to build a career or to build a future. And I think that even the idea that you've been living under the same roof, going to school with the same people through kindergarten, middle school, and high school, that creates a stability.
Mm.
And I think what happened to me is that there was never any of that. And so part of what comedy is when you realize that there is nothing you can rely on, there's no stability in life, really. There's something about comedy is a little bit like taking the whole chessboard and throwing it in the air. It really is. That's kind of what you realize is
What do you mean
don't
by that?
don't don't hold on to anything that feels like permanence. Don't hold on to anything that feels like it's going to last. Have a bemused detachment to everything, because it could very easily be taken away from you. So always be ready to kind of like, um, I guess, keep a sense of humor about this whole thing, because it's just one big game that's going to end at any minute.
Yeah.
I've never really phrased it this way, Nick, but as I think about it, that's kind of what I think comedy does. And I don't know many comics worth their salt that have come from very, very stable backgrounds. They've all come from chaos. It didn't mean my parents weren't great,
Yeah.
but there
Yeah.
was chaos.
Yeah. Well,
And I didn't realize it
a lot
looking
of
back.
regular disruption. Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that makes sense. That makes sense. Well,
Yeah.
and I guess the idea, because I remember when my wife and I were in the military and we were moving a lot, I remember my wife started to become kind of more detached from like places and people, or it was one of these things where she would just say, okay, I'm going to enjoy this for what it is, but I know it's not permanent. And so it was kind of a struggle. It wasn't something that she necessarily enjoyed doing. When we got out of the military, she actually liked being able to set down roots, but there was something about the constant disruption that built a certain degree of resilience and sense of humor, because you had
My,
to.
my daughter told me that I moved the family every 2 years. I never realized that.
Yeah.
I moved my family every 2 years.
Wow.
I was expressing that strange trauma. One of the more heartbreaking things I read was in war zones in Syria before the civil war started, when the Bashar regime was being challenged. A reporter noticed that in certain parts of that country where they knew they were already being driven underground,
Mhm.
the parents stopped holding their children's hands.
Huh.
They were already making distance, which is,
Yeah.
astonishing.
Yeah. It's heartbreaking.
Whether that's true or not, it makes sense to me. I understand that notion of sort of, hey, just be ready. It's a preemptive strike,
Yeah. Yeah.
which, so I guess that was part of what got me to be a comic. I mean, I was trying to be an actor. I went to theater school,
Yeah.
and you learn movement and you learn voice and you learn how to express yourself and cry. You learn to create thin skin. And I wanted to be I wanted to be a brooding actor, dude. I wanted to be Robert De Niro and Christopher Walken and Al Pacino, all the guys I grew up with. I wanted to be the guy that made you cry, but like
Yeah.
a man. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
The
my
singular
girlfriend,
tear that drips down, and
dude,
then yeah.
dude, yes, on a horse looking over his conquered lands, vowing an oath of vengeance. They will pay, my son. They will pay. But my face is rather on camera. My face is rather, it lacks symmetry. I don't have expressive eyes. I've got beady Irish, Italian peasant eyes. Nothing works, dude. I was never going to be muscular. That just doesn't happen. My joke is I'm about as muscular as your average mannequin, no matter what I do. So it's just none of that stuff. I had a comedic. There was already a comedic thing, and I had a woman say in theater school, it was really smart. My friend Nicole. She said, "Bryan, stop trying to be like masculine with this. Your taekwondo and your wrestling, and what are you doing? You're an idiot. You make all of us laugh. That's sexy."
Yeah.
I was like, I do.
Yeah.
And then I had a girlfriend who became a very famous director, Patty Jenkins, and she wrote and directed Monster and Wonder Woman 2, and she's a very big director. And she really knew me,
Yeah.
and she said, I remember she said, I made a speech at a wedding, and it was funny. I just kind of just came out of me, and that cracked everybody up. She said, dude, she goes, you got to stop being a brooding actor. You
Yeah.
are not a mysterious dude. You're the funniest guy we know. Your timing. That's what you do. You do it because you feel awkward. You do it because you're not that. Stop trying to be what you're not.
Yeah.
You get cold easily. You can't rook 90 pounds on your back.
Yeah. Yeah.
All that shit. My coffee has to be just so. There's always a draft. All this. So I guess you get forced into it, man. You just get
Yeah.
forced into it. You are
Well,
what you are.
let me ask you this, because it's funny. Both my daughters are theater kids. They absolutely love it. My daughter really wants to do more with it. But it was something where, like, she really enjoys the challenge of taking on different characters and making it her own, and the whole deal. Did you now, if you have a goal for something, like you want to be the De Niro, the Pacino, you want to be that guy that's kind of the, and then it isn't working for you. Was it something where you kind of felt, was it something that depressed you, or when you started to kind of embrace this other side, was it almost like liberating, like, okay, yeah, this is what I'm supposed to do?
Look, man, I learned how to act in earnest. I really worked at it, and not to be, I'm good. If I
Yeah.
want, I can. I got so mad at Bradley Whitford, who's he's a good actor. Bradley Whitford. He tweeted at Cheryl Hines, who's RFK Jr.'s wife, and he
Yeah.
said, "You're setting a real good example for the kids." Something really nasty
Yeah.
about how she supports her husband, and I'm like, listen, you little. First
Yeah.
of all, don't go after his wife.
Yeah.
You're not a man. And also, you're an actor, bro. You're a good actor. You're a good actor, but you wear makeup and you make believe for a living. And one more thing to you, Bradley Whitford, and the rest of you Hollywood people who are this nasty. I can do everything you can do just as well. You play the same character, dude. I
Mhm.
play characters and I do stand up. You can't do any of that. So you don't live in the real world. Stop with your tweets. Nobody cares about your point of view. I don't know if you've noticed, but the lateral cooperation between Hollywood, all those people that never fly commercially, and the mainstream media didn't seem to work in this election.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the larger point, sorry to throw politics in there, but the larger point is I got to a point where I was really working hard at acting, and I got good at doing that conversational reality. I got pretty good at being an actor you can believe in
Yeah.
traumatic scenes,
Yeah.
but that kind of you get inoculated to that thrill. It's never, the challenge is always there, but I didn't find that very inspiring.
Really?
Being funny,
Yeah.
playing a character, surprising yourself, surprising the audience, because that's what comedy is, man. You're just surprising people. They're like, "Oh, I didn't see that coming,"
Yeah.
or "He
Yeah.
just said that out loud." That
Well,
was that was
I will
yeah.
tell you. I will tell you this though. You're probably the. I mean, I like to watch stand up. And I say this very genuinely. You're probably the only guy that does stand up where I have seen you do something that was you started off a story that was incredibly. I mean, it was funny, the whole deal, and then you dipped into this portion, and I'll tell you specifically what it was. But you dipped into this portion where I was like, whoa. And then right back to like funny, but it's like there was that emotional roller coaster there that usually within comedy it's just it's laughing and you got a crescendo or you might have different points or maybe at the very end they wrap it around to something they said at the very beginning or whatnot. But this was something where it was like, oh wow, for a moment there, you saw something that moved Bryan and he made it move you as well, and it was the Africa trip.
Yeah.
It was that Man Tears.
That was Man Tears.
I think it was Man Tears. Yeah. But and I don't want to. I mean, but it was that whole part where you were talking about like the poachers, right? The poachers, and you're like, what would you do? Like, I'll tell you what I'll do. And it's like, the
I would commit murder from the air. That's exactly what I was doing.
Yeah.
You want to stop and just get a helicopter gunship. I don't know about helicopter gunships, by the way.
Yeah.
Here's the comedian talking about what he'd do with a machine gun.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I just kill all those poachers. And then exactly. And it's like, hey, dude, those are poor villagers.
Yeah.
Do you know what it's like not to be able to feed your kids? Huh,
Yeah.
bro?
Yeah.
Huh, Bryan Callen, who's advocating murder from the air?
Yeah.
You're going to solve that problem?
Well, the way you said it in the skit was, that is very aggressive. Mr. Helicopter Man.
Policy. Yeah. I can't remember. But yeah, that's right. That's right. I was shamed. I was embarrassed by all of it. And that's, people tell me, is that story true? And I said, it whether it happened or not, it's true.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah.
When you tell a story, but it is true.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened to me.
Yeah.
Where I had all these points of view and I had real Africans who are on the ground, who fight this stuff every day.
Yeah.
And looked at me and said, yeah. Well, when let me tell you how much you get for an African rhino's horn, etc.
Yeah. Well, but again, I think that what I really appreciated about that was, again, is I thought when I saw that, I was like, man, this is really unique to Bryan, because I've seen other people try to do that, and usually when they try to do that, it's the woke version, right? And it's not the I'm being funny, it's I'm virtue signaling.
Yeah.
And I'm not engaging in like self-deprecation or something I learned from a meaningful moment that can be both funny and poignant. It's I'm scolding, I'm either scolding the audience or I'm scolding other people and look how good I am. And it never lands. It never lands. It's neither funny nor meaningful.
But it doesn't land for the following reason. We should talk a little bit about what woke. When we say woke, let's define that for a second.
Yeah.
So you read the critical race theorists, which I've done. It's not that they don't have a point. It's not that discrimination isn't intersectional. It's not that a black woman with 2 children has very different concerns than a black man with no children.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
In America, do they suffer discrimination? Sure, especially historically. But there are 2 issues to wokeism that I object to when we talk about this. One, it's reductive. It reduces the world to power, powerless, oppressor, oppressed.
Yeah.
That's it. It looks at everything through a prism of power. Even friendship is considered what? An arrangement, a power dynamic.
A power
marriage.
Structure. Yeah.
A marriage. It's women are subjugated. They do a 4th wave feminism. Men want to kill you. They don't just want to take your rights. They want to kill you. It's antagonistic. It's very reductive. It's deconstructed. It's academics who don't live in the real world who have now deconstructed our world. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for telling me, because you've heard about life and read about life. You've never done life, but thank you so much for setting the stage. And so that the first part is it's reductive. The second thing is it essentially advocates destruction.
Yeah.
It advocates for the destruction of our institutions, of everything that got us here. Do we have problems as a country? Sure. But we're also a country, we're the longest standing democracy. It is the place where you can be, in many cases, who you envision yourself to be, not who you have to be. Most of the world, most of the losers in history, they have to choose. There's who they have to be, and they have to forego who they could be. I would argue that the United States is still a place where you can ultimately exercise your potential. If you can take the risk,
Yeah.
this country favors the bold and the
Yeah.
risk taker. So, and any of us know that the world is not reductive. It's not that simple, man.
Mhm.
And you better be careful about advocating for destruction for revolution.
Yeah.
I have a joke about that. Every time I hear a young person say, "Let's change the world," that's what they hear. I
Yeah.
hear, "Let's kill everybody over 50,"
Yeah.
which is exactly what most revolutions do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you don't have any idea, young man and young lady, what it takes to keep this grid going. It's complicated.
Mhm.
A lot of moving parts.
Mhm.
Well, you might want to educate yourself on what it takes to get all that food on your plate where all you have to do is swipe a credit card
Mhm.
or tap your phone. That's a lot of cooperation, man. And
Yeah.
it can be taken away from you right quick. So that's the first thing that I kind of found railing against as a comic. I was like, this ain't true. I keep seeing the media talk about something, and the rest of us are looking around going, this is not reality. The
Mhm.
rest of us trying to build a life, pay bills, raise kids, contend with everything.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get serious for a second. Where are you getting your protein? Right? Because if you're not getting it from Good Ranchers, then I'm going to tell you where you get it from, God knows where. Because half the stuff that you see with a little American flag on the grocery store, yeah, that was raised in a feedlot somewhere and only shipped to the United States and gone through a process just long enough to get the little American flag to make you feel like you're getting a quality product. But with GoodRanchers.com, you don't got to worry about that because you know you are getting the best American-raised beef, poultry, pork, wild-caught seafood with none of the hormones and other crap that gets placed in all of our food now, delivered straight to your door. And if you go to goodranchers.com and use promo code Nick, not only are you going to get free express shipping to your home, you are going to get a free gift to go along with that. That's right. You subscribe to one of their boxes. You can get free chicken. You can get free ground beef. You can get free salmon, or you can get free bacon with each box that comes as a part of that subscription. I want you to think about that for a second. You show up to home. You open up this box of delicious American Good Ranchers, and they gave you free bacon to wrap all of the other stuff in that box. America. That's what Good Ranchers in. It's America in a box. So go to goodranchers.com, use promo code Nick, support a great company, support yourself, and support the show while you're at it. Goodranchers.com, promo code Nick. When you brought up something I think is important because that has always been the question. Is like, what do you mean when you say woke, right? Because it's not like it was ever like properly defined. I mean, some people would say that it was a hypersensitivity to injustice or a hypersensitivity to racism and sexism. But that's not all it was, because it actually prescribed things as well. And like you said, it was rooted in this concept of critical race theory, and not just critical race theory, but critical theory. And this is where you get into like Herbert Marcuse. This is where you have to understand. This is where you have to understand the
I love that you know
postmodernist.
Marcuse. I love and Nick.
Yeah.
I love that you know these guys. You read the people you disagree with,
Yeah,
and that's so important.
and when you have to understand, Marcuse had one approach, but then you also, if you're not understanding, Jean-Paul Sartre and existentialism, and you're not understanding like
Jacques
Foucault and
Derrida.
Derrida with deconstructionism and Foucault with postmodernism. Like if you're not understanding how all these things kind of intertwine and what it means, both with respect to how they diagnose a problem and then the prescription for it, then you're not getting the full story. And like you said, it's one of the tricks of propaganda is to actually point at something that is a legitimate problem, either historically or currently, or just a part of human nature that we have to regularly contend with and fight back against, is to then act as if there's some sort of perfect solution that if we just did X, it would take care of Y. And like you said,
Beware of trying to create utopia here on Earth. We've got a lot of graves. We've got a lot of graves to point to. The great utopians, Stalin and Mao and Pol Pot, etc. They were very good at getting rid of the people that couldn't be re-educated. They were
yes,
too
yes. My co-host Christian on the podcast, he'll often say that it's like, one of the things I despise about it is that it's a religion of original sin, but with no redemption. Like no, that's it. You're just it. By virtue of your skin color or your economic status or whatever, you're just oppressor or oppressed. And like you said, it deduces you and it reduces everything to these two dynamics. And then it also creates this idea of kind of like the victimhood Olympics, right? Like the higher my intersectional score, the more virtuous I am just by virtue of having it.
I'm going to give you a little insight from the comedy perspective. One of the reasons that the comedy universe moved to Austin, thank you, Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know this, is that the Comedy Store, which was the mainstay, which was, I mean, let me tell you something. On a Tuesday night between 2000, probably 14 and 2020, on a Tuesday night when I walked into that green room to do my set, my lineup, the lineup I was in, I'm looking over at Sebastian Maniscalco, Louis C.K., Norm Macdonald,
Wow.
Joe Rogan, Bill Burr, Anthony Jeselnik, Chris D'Elia. I'm talking about murderers. Joey Diaz, murderers. That was on a Tuesday.
Wow.
Okay? You could pay $24
Wow.
and watch that lineup. And we would, when I say we would murder, we would murder.
Yeah.
It was a renaissance. It was a renaissance, man. I'm that. I don't care what anybody says, and I know comedy. I know the history. That lineup, you cannot find a better lineup. There's on a Tuesday night at the Comedy Store, on a Saturday at the Comedy Store, in the original room or in the main room. You were not getting you. There was no one on the planet who could. There's no lineup. You could take any comic from the history. Nobody can compete with that group. When I tell you the laughter and the revolutionary things that were going on in that room. Now, a lot of those comics, Theo Vaughn, they've all become massive. Andrew Santino, Bobby Lee, that's who was in that green room.
Yeah.
All my content, all of the people we came up with.
Yeah.
And before we were like, all of a sudden we were like, you know, at one point I remember on my podcast, Fighter and Kid was number 4 in the world. I didn't even know what that meant because nobody knew what podcasts were.
Yeah.
And I was having people from Pakistan coming up to me. Like that one guy was like, Mr. Callen, you know, I was like, from Mumbai.
Yeah.
It was crazy. We had the world coming to the Comedy Store because they were all listening to Joe Rogan and the subsidiaries like Fighter and the Kid and all of us. And so it was an absolute renaissance. It was, and it didn't dawn on me that I was part of this until probably 2020, right before it got shut down. So while that's happening, what a lot of people don't know is the LA Times and these different, especially the LA Times, this woke, the LA Times that nobody reads anymore. That's why the owner just fired the whole editorial board.
Wow.
Because he wants to create more balance because you had a bunch of Democratic operatives, scumbags in there. And they would call the Comedy Store and harass the lineup, ask the managers why there weren't more women, more gay people, more trans people. Why was the lineup not reflecting society at large?
Oh my God.
Well, because you morons who've never made anybody laugh. Comedy was the ultimate meritocracy.
Yeah.
We didn't care what you looked like.
Yeah.
Tony Rock was amazing. We had Chris Rock. Anybody was allowed. Wanda Sykes. It doesn't matter whether you were a black woman. Didn't matter if you were trans. Didn't matter. Everybody was a misfit. Everybody was a misfit. People, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and more. I mean, it got weird in the comedy world. Always was. So we didn't care what you did. All that matters was whether you were funny or not. But the amount of pressure that the management at the Comedy Store and other clubs were getting for being, too male, too white, straight, and male. Well, that's who started this whole thing. Don't blame us. This is what happened.
Yeah.
But there were plenty of great women like Eliza Schlesinger, monster, incredible.
This is a problem across the board because if you had to sum up one of the things that was genuinely unique about the United States, and you had to sum it up into one word, it would have been meritocracy. And that doesn't mean it's been perfectly executed. It doesn't mean that I'm not suggesting that there hasn't been, forms of aristocracy or discrimination or legal repression. I understand all of that. What I'm saying is that you have to look at the United States in a space and time compared with everywhere else within the same space and time. And once you start comparing it that way, there is no argument. You can tell me all day long that never existed. Then my question to you is, why was everyone dying to get over here then? If this was equally relevant everywhere else on the globe, then why were they trying to get here? And then, like you said, in those industries, which actually said we're going to elevate this, those were some of the industries that I feel like in comedy specifically, sports is another one. Comedy specifically was one of those areas where I felt like it tore down certain barriers, whether they were racial, whether they were between the sexes, whether they were between different people, different worldviews or backgrounds or countries that they came from. because it was that ability to joke about ourselves in a way that made the differences less scary.
Yeah. See, this is what I love about, and what I love about there are three things I love where the playing field is. You can't fake. You can't fake. You can't fake dance. You either can dance or you can't. You
Yeah.
can't fake comedy. You're either funny or you're not. And you can't fake sports.
Yeah.
I don't care who your agent is. I don't care how many people like you. You either got the goods or you don't. That's why
Yeah.
I love fighting. I don't care. Fighting does not care, dude.
Yeah.
You either have your hands up. You either know how to catch angles. You either know how to throw. That's why the UFC is such a beautiful thing, because that's the most honest place on the planet. That octagon. Oh, are you a black belt? Awesome. Are you an Olympic wrestler? Awesome.
Yeah.
What else are you? Good looking? That's great. Nobody gets a
Yeah.
when somebody's out there to crush your face. You
Yeah.
either have it or you don't.
Well, and you're rooting for the underdogs in these places, right? That's another
Yes.
thing that I love about. That's another thing that I feel is inherent about American culture is we love a comeback story. We love an underdog story. Like we relish it. Um, yeah, and yeah,
But they went too far, didn't they?
yeah,
They went too far, and Americans are sensible. You cannot have like John Oliver, that zero. That guy was built like a pointy pear. I've seen
yeah,
him with his shirt off. Holy, I mean, talk about the last guy picked on the team. This guy's talking about how we should, anybody who has a problem with biological males and female sports is far right and is a bigot. Like, you've never done a sport, dude. You don't know anything about the difference. Shut up. Stop talking. You're not funny. It's just unbelievable. But they went too far, man.
Well,
They started doing things that the rest of us went, you're out of your mind. You're going to give 8-year-olds cross-sex hormones
yeah.
and puberty blockers. I mean, this is an outrage.
Well, where do you think to that point? Because this was again, what shocked me from being in the political world, right? And I remember I have been in politics. This next session will be my 10th year, right? So I've been in elected office long enough to where I remember us all kind of sitting down in each other's offices and having a bourbon and talking about things and stuff being able to be kind of broken down into, yeah, we don't agree on the top marginal tax rate, right? But we're both dads, right? Or we're both girl dads or whatever it was. And you could have that conversation where there were certain things that still connected us. And, again, I go back to sports was one of those things, and comedy was one of those things. I'll never forget being in Special Forces, and we loved Dave Chappelle, like all of us. We loved Dave Chappelle. And we had this one guy who was a little bit more, I don't know. He had spent more time in higher ed than the rest of us. I'll put it that way. And he was like,
Green Beret, Green Beret. I'm listening.
yeah, right. And he's like, I can't believe, you like, no, it was part of a Dave Chappelle, thing. He goes, oh, well, would you make that joke? Like, yeah, because we all watched it together. Like, are you kidding me? We all thought that was hysterical. And again, it was one of those things where it was this unifying component when you had comedians that could make fun of the various stereotypes that we all know exist, right? Yes. And instead of turning it into like some sort of like really bad like repudiation, it was like, okay, this is kind of a funny thing. And then half the time it would open up conversations about why is that? Like, oh, well, this or this. Oh, okay. Oh, that makes sense, right? Yeah. And it had this ability of taking things that, again, that if you didn't know better, you could actually use as forms of discrimination. But the moment like you understood it, it was like, oh yeah, that's a very human thing, regardless of what your individual experience would be. But what do you think was the moment? Because I remember there was like a 2 to 3 year period where I felt like the world I understood, even with all of its differences and differences of opinions and wide variety of political views and ideological views, the world still made sense. And then all of a sudden it didn't. And again, like I said, it felt
you have to look at what motivates these things, and you have to look at the incentive structures. So,
well, but specifically, here's what I really want to get your opinion on is like, what was the point where all of a sudden, because like I said, it's like everything before its wake was gone, right? It was just, we all supposed to believe this now, and we all better repeat these things, and you better not say anything like this, or else you're. And then all of a sudden, one day I wake up and comedy, like, can you point?
The answer to your question is probably the Me Too movement.
Okay.
because what happened to men in power was that they now a woman could tell a story,
Yeah.
and all you had was a statement. And a woman could tell a story, and it didn't matter whether it was in college 25 years ago, whatever it was. Men didn't have any way to fight back.
Mm.
They knew that anyone could tell a story about them, and it could be, he groped me in the, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
It did not matter. All the power shifted to the female side. And you watched careers literally evaporate. No due process, all rumor. Now, some monsters were taken down.
Yeah.
Harvey Weinstein,
Yeah.
Bill Cosby. These are monsters. But very quickly, that became a weapon that the press and the hardcore destructionists could use against anyone.
Mm.
And there was real cooperation with, you know, um, whether it was gossip journalists or whatever. It became sort of a way to make your name as
Mm.
that person who was
Exposing.
going to
Yeah.
expose the corruption.
Yeah.
It's not that it was all bad, but revolutions without checks and balances
Yeah.
eat their own and becomes a snake eating its own tail. And it's probably what Obama was referring to as the circular firing line.
Yeah.
You get into a situation like with everything that it gets totally out of control. People who are not good, not honest brokers get in on the mix, and it all becomes about destruction and power.
Well,
And when the power balance shifts, so people, and then let's add to the fact that you could also garner a big enough Twitter storm to ruin somebody's career based on what someone said they said.
yeah. Yeah.
And Douglas Murray, in his book, The Madness of Crowds, does a very good job of giving examples and explaining how this happened.
Mhm.
It did become, the social media gave the mob that kind of power.
Yeah.
I think we've finally gotten to a point where people don't trust the mob.
Yeah.
People don't even know if it's real. The internet, in many ways, ain't real. And the election of Donald Trump, I mean, think about what they threw at this guy,
Mhm.
besides bullets
Yeah.
and the threat of bullets.
Yeah.
You're a fascist, you're a communist. I mean, the lawfare alone, 91 indictments, you know, all of that stuff. And this guy just kept coming.
Yeah.
You can say whatever you want about Donald Trump. You can call him a narcissist. He's got all kinds of personality flaws. I'd be the first to say that, but tough,
Mhm.
tough. And this was the first time. This was the first time that there was at least some sense where people said, "Hold on,
Yeah.
you don't get to cancel a human being completely.
Yeah.
You don't get to say this particular thing that somebody said he did does not erase him as a human being." And I'm using him and her very deliberately
Yeah. Yeah.
because that's what it was. I mean, so the power structure. And so what happens then is you better toe the line, because if they came for your friend, they can come for you.
Yeah. Well,
And they don't need any proof. They can just have a story.
so let,
And
let me.
I think that was the turning point. That's really what drove a lot of people. That's what created a McCarthyist
Yeah.
atmosphere of fear. And the left got their way. And the second thing is, remember that gay marriage was a real Western political movement
Mhm.
across. It was organized, it was very well financed, and gay rights overall were pushed on very repressive countries, whether they were in Africa or the Middle East. If you wanted to do business, there was a lot of pressure. I mean, Chechnya, when whatever his name is, Kadyrov, came out and they found out they were killing gay people, torturing them, and all kinds of stuff, terrible stuff. Hollywood, they were going to shoot some movies in that area. Hollywood said, not in a million years.
Yeah.
And so, and to their credit, by the way, I don't think there's a problem with that. But what happens when you have a massive, massive infrastructure of people that are fighting for gay rights? And what happens when all those objectives are met with? All your goals, where you draw a line through everything you wanted to try. Gay rights are a real thing, and I support that. But they moved to trans rights.
Mhm.
That same infrastructure moved to trans rights. You know, somebody made the same correlation when you had all that. You'd know more about this, but after Bora Bora or Tora Bora,
Yeah.
we no longer, we kind of crushed Al Qaeda, and they went into Waziristan and Pakistan. Well, what was left? I mean, let's turn on the Taliban. You know, even though Mullah Omar apparently was said to have said, "Hey, I want to make a deal here."
Mhm.
Well, we got our tier one operators in here, and we got a whole bunch of infrastructure. Let's work with the Northern Alliance. I don't know if that's true, but you can see what happens with these things. There's too much invested to not then find another problem
Mhm.
to solve. So I think those two things are what really made a difference. And the trans movement, I mean, it was madness. It was absolutely madness.
Well, this
You
is
you had euphemisms like gender affirming care for minors.
yeah. Yeah, well, and it's
No, I call that child sacrifice. I call it child sacrifice.
yeah.
I call it the one of the most evil things on the planet. And I am violently against puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones that became the order of the day at the St. Louis Children's Hospital. You scumbags.
Mhm.
Okay? That's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
Okay? And a lot of comics kind of started to go, "Hey, I don't care what the threat is. I'm a comic, man.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not going to stop speaking my mind, and I never have."
No,
So
no, you
I'm sorry about that long answer,
no,
but I
no,
think
no.
that
I appreciate it because it was interesting. I was kind of wondering because again, I wanted to know what you saw with that. I remember like on the political side when I saw the Kavanaugh hearings. That's where I started to see. That's where I would overhear conversations where you would have like a table full of women that would be going, "Do you mean to tell me that somebody could make an accusation against my son 20 years from now and their whole
that's
life is
right.
supposed to be destroyed?"
40 years, Nick.
Yeah,
40.
and it was one of those things where it was this realization that, oh, yeah, there is a genuine problem, but the mechanism we're now utilizing in order to address it is going to create something that's also bad. And there has to be limits on how we actually exercise this power. There still has to be objective reality, right? There still has to be
Yeah.
due process. And I think the what you saw within the trans movement as well, especially when it started targeting children. I think the vast majority of people, like, you know, I am and anybody that follows me, anybody that knows me, anybody that listens to my stuff knows I'm a very dedicated Christian, and there's a certain moral code that I believe in. And on my politics, I'm also I have this libertarian streak where it's like, look, I'm not saying I don't care what you do. I do. Like by the nature of my faith, I do. But by the same token, that doesn't mean I believe that the government now has the authority to come in and punish you if you do things that I don't agree with. I tend to draw this line of demarcation where it's like, look, provided you're not infringing on the rights of other people, I think you should be allowed to make a whole host of decisions I don't personally agree with. But the moment it starts to be this thing where, again, it's, you know, when we started calling it gender affirming care, and it's like, no, 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 it's dysphoria affirming care. We now have this break with
Yes.
reality where I am no longer allowed to point at something that is real, that is
You're not
objectively
even, by the way,
false.
Nick, you're not even allowed to, a therapist in many states they were trying to push wasn't even allowed to say, well, maybe there's something off here because
Yes.
that would be considered conversion therapy.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
understand?
look,
I mean,
we had we had a man named Jeff Younger on, and Jeff Younger from Texas. Him and his wife got divorced. She started to transition one of his sons when he was 2 years old. They got
oh my,
divorced in Texas. She ended up like they were forcing him to go to this counselor who was trying to gender affirm his son. He goes, "I'm not going to that." So a different judge within the Dallas circuit basically took away his parental rights. She then moved to California. He appealed all the way to the Texas Supreme Court to try to prevent her from moving. Texas Supreme Court said, "Well, she's no more likely to transition your son in California than she is Texas." And
oh,
just now,
that's a nightmare. It's like,
just tweeted out that a California judge ruled that, you know, yes, she can now transition his 12-year-old son. And it's that's the part where I think a lot of people were looking at. And I remember the moment. I remember
Gavin Newsom, that phony.
oh my, and I
Yes,
remember
he
that
was.
moment where they went after Dave Chappelle. And I was like, oh, well, we'll see if you get away with this, you know. And Netflix and everyone at that point was like, yeah, think you're going to successfully take on Dave Chappelle. And so I remember these moments where kind of the culture as a whole started to recognize that things might have gone too far because people were starting to think of how this was going to impact their kids and whether or not.
Because Nick, they're bad people. Like, it's one thing to say I'm balanced and I can see your point of view. I love talking to somebody who disagrees with me, who thinks that there certain aspects of the economy should be socialized, or somebody who's an old school liberal. I have no problem with that. I learn from people like that.
Yeah.
You're talking about sociopaths. You're talking about bad people. I don't want to compromise with those people.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but there are some things in life worth fighting against with everything you have. And you define yourself. We define ourselves as a nation and as a people and as a person based on what we're willing to, the lines we're willing to defend.
Mm-hmm.
Where are your lines? Don't tell me you don't have lines. Because
Yeah.
if you don't have lines, you're not a real person, not a realized person. There are things I believe in that I will fight for. And that supersedes my reputation. It even supersedes probably my economic well-being.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna toe your line. I'm not gonna tell a lie. And
Well,
I'm sure as hell not gonna do that when children are on the line.
I think
I'll go to war with you.
yeah,
And
I
I'm
think
still at war. I've never voiced that I don't believe in your gender ideology. I don't believe in it.
yeah.
I don't. I believe in two genders. I'm not buying your language. I'm speaking my mind.
Ladies and gentlemen, do you appreciate what we do here? Because we appreciate you. But would you like to be a little bit more intimate with the Making the Argument team? Don't make it weird. Don't make it weird. I'm just saying there is an opportunity to join our intentional community. And within that intentional community, there are additional benefits because it turns out that membership has its privileges. In fact, a lot of the episodes that we decide have been decided by our membership. We also have monthly meetups that you can participate in with Tina and myself, where we just exclusively sit around and talk about things you're interested in, to include answering your questions for hours, right? If you're interested in any of that, you want to be a part of the live audience and actually have your questions prioritized on all of our podcasts, go over to Circle, go to the link in our description, consider joining our community. We have different membership levels for any budget, and you are the people that get to help shape the direction that this show is going to be going into 2025. So head over there, join up, and we will see you as part of our intentional community. I had Constantine Christen ask me, he goes, hey, because I made this distinction between leftist and liberal. He goes, what is your distinction between those two things? And I said, it's a question of objective truth and objective morality. Now, we all understand that we have different perspectives on the truth, and that's one of the reasons why it's a good idea to get different perspectives on the truth, because hopefully it's helping everyone come to a greater realization of what is the truth, right? But it's not my truth and your truth.
Let me just jump in there before you say that, because think about Kamala Harris. What word did she use? My values haven't changed.
Yeah.
Values and morality are very different.
Mm-hmm.
Your values are not, you never use the word truth and morals.
Yeah.
Truth and morality, when you use those words, Nick, those are considered trigger words for the left.
Well, and that's what
talking about subjective reality.
Well, and that's what it comes down to, right? Is that if there's an objective truth and there's objective morality, which is to say that there are things that are objectively good and things that are objectively bad or objectively evil. And then the next question I always ask is, do you believe that we can utilize things like the laws of logic, the scientific method, and empirical reason? Do you believe we can use these things to get a better understanding of what the truth is and what is good or bad? And I knew a lot of liberals that were committed to all three of those things: objective truth, objective morality, logic. And here's what would happen. We would sometimes we would diagnose the problem differently. That might have had to do with experience or perspective. Sometimes we might offer a different solution because we had diagnosed it differently. But the difference is that there was a mechanism that we could both use, whether my solution got applied, whether their solution got applied, where we could review something and go like, that's interesting. Maybe we didn't factor in this, or maybe we should consider this, or maybe because of the nature of this, maybe this is an appropriate role for government, or maybe it is. But there was always a standard.
The math.
Here's what it was. There was a standard that didn't belong to their side and didn't belong to my side. It just was. It just was.
Right. Scientific record as an example.
Yeah, it just was, right? And all of a sudden, with the entrance of postmodernism and deconstructionism, where now it's like, no. There is no objective truth. There is no objective meta narrative. There's just your perspective. There's power, and there's the adjudication of power, and there's those who have it and those who don't. And we're going to elevate the people that don't. Okay, well, what happens when they got the power? Are they now the bad guys? Like, what? How does this work? And the answer is, and it goes back to your point of, when you have the mechanism and you're always looking for another problem, it's like, no, the revolution never ends for them. It just finds different targets. It
That's
just
right.
finds
That's
different.
right. And by the way, the only bedrock you can anchor into with the left is how you feel. The rudder is your feelings. I mean, this is where you get into, you're making the workplace unsafe. You work
Yeah.
at Google, bro.
Yeah.
Like, shut up about an unsafe workplace.
Well, and
And where
your
thought to myself,
feelings only matter if you have the correct intersectional score for the person whose feelings you're comparing them to. So my feelings look, okay, so I'm a white, straight, male, Christian, conservative. My feelings do not matter within that score system, right? And then it becomes a question of, like you said, with the intersectional component. I can look at intersectional theory and say, okay, I get it that people that have more challenges might face either more discrimination or more potential hardships or whatever it is. And I'm fine with working with people to say, like, okay, what's a proper way to adjudicate that? I'm not willing to say that therefore your ability to apply facts and reason to a particular situation are no longer applicable because of your skin color or because of your economic status or because of your sex. Like, no, I'm not willing to. I will not submit to that.
but it doesn't even get CBC. Look, think about how insane this is. And this is another thing I talk about. First, feelings for you and I as men, when we grew up. I have that joke where if I can't tell my friends about my feelings. If I
Yeah.
call my friends and I'm like, Nick, I'm sad, you're going to be like, you got the wrong number.
Yeah.
Like, that's how we grew up,
Yeah.
because your feelings are not really much of a rudder I can rely on. They're going to change tomorrow. But think about something else. It got so crazy, and my next special, which by the way I'm shooting at Rogan's place January 11th.
Oh,
at
nice.
Leadership. It's called False Gods. If you get a chance, but it's one of the things I was thinking about was the whole trans movement, which was a non-binary movement. You've got blonde hair, blue eyed kids at Harvard who come home and say to their parents, "Hey, Dad, Mom, I'm not your son, I'm not your daughter, I'm neither or both." Boom, depends on the day. Okay, and feelings have taken on such a prominent position in the human experience that must always be protected. God forbid you trample on someone's feelings. Why, you'll be canceled because if you are trans, that is how you feel. You don't have to transition. Leah Thomas was a fully intact 6'4" male who happens to feel feminine, so grows his hair long, and shatters records because he can't hack it with the dudes. But how dare I even say he's he? He feels like a she.
Yeah.
Thus, I must then honor his minority status. Now, think about this. If you're black and you're brown, you and I can have a very real conversation about how the wreckage of someone's historical past, slavery and colonization, did have an effect on black and brown people. It was a difficult and is a difficult thing to overcome. There are still ramifications that are clear and present that one has to contend with, whether you want to say, and people do. But white people, especially educated white people, Nick, have finally invented a way to be minorities as well on the same level. But
Yeah.
at least black and brown peoples had to go through slavery and colonization. White people now are saying, I'm a minority on the same level you are because I feel like one.
Yeah. Oh no, it's
Oh my God,
it's
you
absolutely
arrogant,
amazing.
privileged American / Australian / Brit / Scots, Irish, lacking perspective puppet. Like, what are you talking about?
Well, and
This is where you got to get smacked right up the side of the
well,
head. Like,
I
hey, too
the
far.
other one, like you said, the other issue that I have with it is when you turn victimization into the source of power. when you turn victimization as the mechanism for which you get power, you create an incentive to seek victimization, whether it be real or imagined. And that's why
Yeah.
we were all commanded to sit around and call things stunning and brave that were neither stunning nor brave,
God.
because that was the new mechanism. And I do feel like but again, the reason why I think that comedy played a role here, that the rest of society to some degree, I don't want to say was powerless to confront, um, because obviously you had elements with, like, in the church, you had elements within more conservative sectors of society that push back against some of this. But the reason why I think comedy was successful in areas that other places were not is because it was still one of those realms where there was this expectation that I'm going to be able to go here with an audience that can be incredibly diverse in the truest and richest sense of that word, right? Because I hate this idea that superficial diversity equals diversity.
Right, me too.
Genuine diversity features a wide array of differences between people. But it was one of those places you could go into that and expect that we're all here for the same thing. We're going to laugh at something. And some of the greatest work that was done within a lot of this stand-up too was the crowd work. Right? It was the crazy Karen that decided she was going to, tone police or thought police somebody on stage,
Yeah, well,
and get wrecked, get
oh yeah,
absolutely
get
wrecked.
wrecked because what really woke comics up, what politicized comics were hopelessly apolitical. I mean, they're just incredibly selfish. Like I remember Rogan and I did a long time ago, probably 12, 13 years ago, we did an episode of Meat Eater. And Joe looks at me and says, "Man, we're representing comics, so we better do a good job." And I said, "Oh yeah, comics. That unified bunch." He started laughing. It's like the most. But what really did galvanize comics and turn them political, and especially push them rightward. It's like was COVID
Mm,
and stopping us from being able to perform.
yeah.
I mean, and keeping our children and ourselves in masks and not knowing, some faceless bureaucrat who just kept deciding no, or Randy Weingarten, who obviously has a lot of comorbidities and so was very worried about COVID. It might be more a foodborne illness for you.
Yeah.
I can't stand her, sorry. But these are the people that were keeping our children in masks for 2 years, alone in their rooms. I will never forgive them,
Mhm.
ever. And, people talk about now, they say things like this. I love this now. The left needs its own Joe Rogan. Hey, guys,
Yeah.
you had your own Joe
Yeah.
Rogan. It was called Joe
Rogan.
Rogan.
Right. He was voting for Bernie Sanders.
Yeah,
People, like,
dude.
come on.
Yeah, dude, you had your own Joe Rogan
Yeah.
until you got so crazy
Yeah.
that he was like, hey, dude, I can't get with this insanity.
Yeah.
I can't do anything right.
Yeah.
You're not even listening to me and criticizing me. So,
Yeah.
Look, common sense won. People like you developed this huge following because you were telling the truth with humor. That's how I reached out to you.
Mhm.
I was listening to this guy. I'm like, this dude's, I was like, who is this guy? He cracks me up. He's saying things I care about. Oh, he's a Green Beret. Yeah, okay. That's my kind of guy. And I think I hit you up. And, it's pretty cool. But by the way, I want to bring you hunting. I want to bring you, me, and Tim Kennedy and my buddy Jimmy Johnson of NASCAR fame. We go out to London, my friend Joe's house, and we shoot deer.
You
and
hunt the
partridge.
British? That's a big thing in Virginia.
Listen, we're going to wear tweed jackets, ties. It's going to be awesome. And you're going to be in that group. They'll love you. Yeah. So I'm very optimistic. I'm very optimistic. And I think it's a good time for comedy.
Mhm.
And I think, look, how about Tony Hinchcliffe?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And he was worried.
Yeah.
He's worried. He's a roaster. You're going to get him. Tony's going to Tony.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's going to take risks. And he was very worried for a while that maybe I've swayed the vote.
Yeah.
Puerto Ricans were like, hey, bro, he's a comic.
Yeah.
Shut up. I'm voting for Trump
Yeah.
because I want my kids to be able to have a little spending money. Like, what are you talking about? Like, this Democrat thing hasn't been working for me in the past 4 years. Your Biden economics. Yeah. He's a comic. He made a joke.
Well, and
You think they're that sensitive? You think Puerto Ricans can't see through a joke that might have been in poor taste to them? Like, stop.
yeah.
They were fine.
Well, I think that's again one of the things that I find encouraging is that I felt like there was elements of what I would have called this is going to sound cliche, but kind of that rebellious American spirit where it's I'm not going to be told what to do, right? I'm not going to be told what to do. It's
Absolutely.
and I see elements of that returning back in a big way where it's kind of a pendulum swing. And look, let's be honest, that pendulum can swing in a way that it isn't necessarily good. Like there needs to be. I want there to always be a sense. I want there always to be a sense of honor and a dedication to truth and compassion, not just simply my side wins and your side loses.
That's right, Nick. That's right. Divided government was something the founding fathers were not afraid of.
Yeah.
Divided government keeps government moving slowly.
Yeah, well, and because I always say this, that what made America special, and great, if you will, right, was not it was not necessarily the composition of our government, right? Like, don't get me wrong, I think living in a constitutional republic which uses democratic processes, I like all of that. That's my preferred system. But what makes me an American, it is not the fact that I get to vote every couple of years for whoever's going to occupy temporary political office, right? Like, that's not what it is. It was this idea that, look, it ain't perfect, but where else do you want to go in order to maximize, this much individual liberty and property rights where regardless of how I grew up or who my parents were, there's a lot I can accomplish. And compared with the rest of the world and certainly with the rest of human history, my gosh, this is unique. This is unique.
Yeah.
And the idea that and the idea that people are going to rip it down because it's not perfect. Like, are you kidding me, bro? Like,
right.
So
I think Eric Weinstein. Have you had Eric on your podcast?
I haven't, but his last one he did with Chris Williamson was epic.
Dude, I got to get you. So he's a good buddy.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell him that he has to do this podcast because you'd love him and he'd love you. Eric said something that was so brilliant. He said, the magic of America is that you have a right to burn the flag you have no interest in burning.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought that was just, Eric says stuff where I'm just like, I'll hang out with Eric and he'll just say stuff. He was explaining math to me.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, my buddy has a major, he's a math major from Stanford University. He's made a lot of money, done very well. And we were having dinner, we were hanging out. And Eric was talking about, he was explaining to me the difference between a good question and a bad question mathematically.
Yeah.
When trying to measure the ripple effect of a wave, like he'll do stuff like that. And I was just like, I'm like,
yeah. I like pie.
You guys will be talking to a domestic chicken or a donkey. I'm that dumb. I'm that dumb for real.
Yeah.
And you just realize I'm running a race against a panther. And my buddy goes, yeah, but dude, there are probably 6 people in the world that are better at math than Eric. So,
you feel a little better.
I was like, damn.
Yeah.
He's a guy I got to get you on. I will 100% put you guys together on a text.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. Well, Liz, hey, tell everyone where they can follow, where they can find you, and obviously tell us about the special coming out.
Yeah, when does this air?
Oh gosh, I don't know. This will probably air within the next probably in December.
Okay, so just go to bryancallen.com. I'll be in Denver, December, I think 11th, 12th, and 13th, something like that. I'll be at Comedy Works downtown. What an amazing club. I'll be at Naples Off the Hook Comedy Club, which is an amazing club in Naples, the 20th, 21st, 22nd. And then I'll be in Port Charlotte right before New Year's. Port Charlotte Comedy Zone, I think it's called. The Visani Theater, Port Charlotte. That's my December. And then Phoenix, Arizona, Desert Ridge Improv, January 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. I know I'm crazy to do it right after New Year's, but you got to push yourself. Dude. You got to push yourself. I'm getting ready for my special.
Yeah.
The big thing is the special at the Mothership, Austin, January 11th. That's when I'm shooting it, but I'll be there January 10, 11, and 12. If you're around, Nick, you come on by. But I'm pumped. I'm pumped for that. And that's it. BryanCallen.com, BryanCallen.com for all my dates. And I guess that's it, man. I don't know.
No, I appreciate it. Again, I just tell the audience and whatnot, like, listen, okay, now disclaimer for the parents. you're not going to watch a lot of these specials with your kiddos, right?
No, my new one is. I think my new one is very clean. I don't even swear.
Good. The new one is clean. Good, yeah. But no,
Yeah,
let me tell you what I appreciate most about Bryan, and I really want the audience to kind of like understand this. Comedy does play a really important role within our culture, and this goes back to as far as we have, any sort of text that we can decipher. That there is something therapeutic about this realm, and it is a realm that is able to challenge things for both good or for evil. But I've seen Bryan again. What I find very, very unique about Bryan's comedy is I usually show up to listen to somebody make me laugh, and he does that. He does that in spades. But there's also this component about being able to bring up some other topics and whatnot that are in there that are important. And again, whenever you have somebody that's willing to be in an industry that is fighting for something a little bit more foundational than just having a good show, right? Or whatnot, that understands that there are certain foundations within our society that make it work and are worth defending and are most importantly worth risking something for, right? A man that doesn't know what he's willing to fight for, doesn't know what he's willing to suffer for, doesn't know what he's willing to die for, is just not a man. That's a boy. And I think Bryan's proven that he knows what he's willing to fight for, and I really appreciate that about him. So, Bryan, thank you very much for being on, brother. Thank you very much to our audience, and we will see you next episode.